Hello, everybody. Welcome back to TARTLEcast. I am here completely over-caffeinated, courtesy of Jason and Beanbox. We got it. Where'd this one come from? Oh, this is the Los Milagros Novo coffee from Central America. Nothing like more people putting in human work so that we can get caffeinated here in the morning.
Yes. Well, they need to, those people in Central America need to do some human work.
Yes.
And go to tartle.co.
I love that.
And get paid for that work.
Central and LATAM.
I don't know how much they got paid for those beans, but
yeah. And we've seen Nubank's growing and like significantly quickly in Latin America. Well, but here's another asset class for you to jump onto, LATAM. It's called Tartle. And speaking of Tartle, to bring awareness to that asset class, someone else who's also a very avid coffee drinker, I don't think he over-caffeinates as much as we do, but our chief revenue officer, Marty, as I would like to call him, Herrick, is joining us today on TartleCast. We want to introduce him. We want to give you a little bit of his background, because if you're a part of Tartle, you got to put your face out there to the public. That's what it's about. So everyone listening, this is the education. This is where it happens. And for Tartle to survive, revenues are required. So that's why this role is so important. That's why someone to lead education on this front to enterprises has to be here, has to be a part of the team. So Marty, thank you for joining us.
Yeah, thanks for having me, guys. I'm excited to be a part of the team.
Yeah, it's great. Love to have you on the podcast too, which is fantastic. I know you're going to begin to open that up. So Marty, people don't know you. They don't really know about your life story. You know, for them, it's like, okay, well, what have you? They know us. But the real thing that's important to them is, why are you here? What is it about the draw of Tartle compared to what you were doing in your past, the narrative of your life? How did this transition happen to here in the now? And how do you see the future going forward? Talk to us.
Yeah, gosh, that's a really good question. A lot to unpack there. So about me, I think the first place I'll start is I'm a minority. I come from a biracial family, something that I'm very proud of. And that is actually Vietnamese on my mother's side and Irish on my father's side. But growing up, my experience, if you look at me with the name Martin, you probably look at me and you say, that guy's probably Hispanic. I grew up largely in the South, the Southwest. And so for the most part, the life experience I've had as a person growing up in the United States has been that of a Hispanic male. And I'll be the first person to say, who has grown up with a Caucasian, white, green-eyed, freckle-faced father, that my experiences in the same places that we were together were always different from his. And so from a very young age, I started noticing, just the differing paths that we would get in terms of the treatment, me getting pulled out of elevators that we were in together because people, saw a young Hispanic male standing next to, 9 white people and didn't understand why that young Hispanic male was, in that group. So those little nuanced experiences that I grew up having really informed the career path that I went down, which ended up being higher education finance. And when I first started in higher education and later on in higher education finance, I thought what I was doing, and for the large part, I did. I don't want to sound like this wasn't actually the case, but higher education was the path for minorities to change their circumstances, to change, who they were and the generations that came after them, what they would have access to. It was going to be higher education that was going to change that. I bought into that message. So I worked at a college, worked at a university for about 7 years. Then after that, I transitioned over to the private education lending space. And when I was there for about 10 years across, different asset classes of higher education finance, I was telling myself I was helping particularly, I was helping everybody, but I was helping particularly minority communities, underserved communities, invest in their futures and the futures of their families. And that was largely the case for a long time. But even in the early 2000s, the teens, I don't even know if that's what you call it. Yeah, I think you call it the teens, right?
Yep.
Tuition just started skyrocketing. I mean, tuition from 2001 to 2021, the cost of higher education has increased faster than any other costs in the United States, probably outside of healthcare. And it's, to put that in context, San Diego State in 2001, $999 a semester. San Diego State in 2021, or I'm sorry, I think in 2019, was somewhere around 13,000. So much more expensive to go to college these days, and that's at a state university.
Can I ask you
Go
something
ahead.
then? So, Marty, the whole idea of education is to increase understanding amongst human beings of our world around us and other people, socially, politically, technologically. The access to that thing then becomes prohibitively difficult when it's 13 times more expensive. And it's not like everybody's become 13 times more wealthy. So
Agreed.
if you have communities of people that are lacking a opportunity to educate themselves or have access to education, and then it becomes prohibitively expensive, what good does that do for the world? That structure, when you have education tied to inflation and massive amounts of debt that have to become piled on for people that are already in these our developed communities, have trouble because of racial profiling, cultural profiling, gender profiling. If you bring those things together, it's already harder for them to pay back towards that education, which shouldn't have been prohibitively expensive in the first place. So not only do they have to find opportunity after, which is not a guarantee, and it's going to be more difficult, it's also prohibitively difficult to begin. So, and if I think about you getting pulled out of the elevator from your father, it's because there's a lack of human understanding. And all I'm seeing is more people getting pulled out of that elevator because they never had the chance to understand, or the people around them. And so I only see the problem which you have gone through personally becoming exacerbated. Does that make sense?
Yeah, absolutely. Well, and I want to just say, for the purpose of saying it out loud, my experience is, extremely watered down compared to a lot of the people that I know, who are, part of the Black, brown, and female communities that deal with it on a much worse level. But my exposure to it showed me that it's definitely there. And the cost of education now is catching up to the value of education in terms of what you earn afterwards. But it's having a different impact, especially on minority communities, in that when you graduate from college with $30,000 in debt and you're 22 years old, that's a lot of debt to be in at a really young age. I mean,
Yeah.
who of us is prepared to be in $35,000 in debt at 22, 23 years of age?
No one.
Um, and with the job market, with COVID-19 and making it the job market, even more sketchy. And I think opening up the eyes for a lot of people who were taking out that much debt and going to work in jobs that you don't want to do because you have to pay your student loans, right? If you graduate with $35,000 in debt, you don't have the luxury of taking unpaid internships at Goldman Sachs or, these
Correct.
really prestigious
Who gets
experiences because
who gets
you,
to do that?
yeah,
The ones that
exactly.
have the people to pay for that opportunity for them. It might be unpaid that they're getting, but somebody pays somewhere, and it's only the
That's
people
right.
that have the means to do so. So that
Well,
it's a self-fulfilling cycle at that point.
yeah, it's generational wealth. Those who have generational wealth and can pay off the debt faster get into the more lucrative jobs and then are able to participate in the economy at a larger scale sooner, and then develop more generational wealth that they're able to pass down to to their children. And so for the underrepresented and underbanked communities that go into that need the 5 to 6 year not a hockey stick growth in income, but actually more like a steady incline in income, they get less options. They get less attractive options. They're taking the jobs at fast food restaurants because they need to start paying their student loans. And so that's just like the tip of the iceberg, guys. Like really
But
just
a
the
lot of
top of
people
it.
don't realize this, Marty, and you know this as well as I do. You're 22 years old. You get a job for, let's say you come out and you get a job for 45,000,
Yep.
which is a good paying at 22.
Yeah.
And you have 30,000, 35,000 debt. You're not paying that off anytime soon.
No, you're
Yeah.
not.
You're barely living.
You're holding on to that till you're 40.
That's
Yes.
right.
You know.
That's right. Yeah, that's right. And
Marty,
so actually,
yeah, go ahead.
well, I was just going to say to your point, Alexander, University of Wisconsin at Madison did a study in the state of Wisconsin for how long it takes the average student to pay off their student loans, and it was 19 years. 19
Gross.
years to pay off your student loan. So you graduate at 22, 23, you're in your early 40s before you pay that off. That's a heavy thing to be carrying around with you for 20 years,
Well,
impacting
think
all
about
of your
this.
decisions.
That's exactly right, Marty. Every decision you make, every opportunity is through the lens of, I still have to make sure I pay this debt back. So I'm going to do things that are otherwise not in the best interest for me.
Work for Goldman Sachs.
Work for Goldman Sachs. Yeah, exactly.
Yeah. Maybe
So then,
yeah, maybe a bad
so then
example.
help me understand here, Marty. If we're talking about redlining, lack of opportunity, if we're talking about education and understanding,
Equality.
if we're talking about generating value, new assets, bringing this to people that otherwise don't have that opportunity, why the transition to Tartle? What is it about you championing the future and doing this for human beings? How do you see that occurring where you are now?
Well, I think the decision really had to do with a couple of my early meetings with you guys, where you gave me kind of the stats on who's using Tartle right now.
Mhm.
It's data conscious people who are aware that who's using their information and how, and it's people who are coming from around the world, developing countries and within the United States, largely the underrepresented communities that I feel passionate about. And so, in my experience in the last 10 years, data drove everything. It drove the underwriting. It drove the programs that were offered at institutions. It drove how much financial aid and grants and scholarships were being offered to students, which students, why, if they volunteered, if they're captain of the cheer squad, things like that. All of those metrics informed their award letter, which said this is how much you're going to get from us, and this is how much in loans you're going to have to take, and ultimately what your debt burden is going to be after you leave. I found myself, I'll just wrap this up. I found myself disenfranchised with the work that I was doing, and starting out thinking that I was helping people gain access to higher education. Towards the end, because of the cost growth of higher education, I was just helping them take out more debt. And so then I stumbled
Yeah.
across Tartle and looked at your mission, which is to give people, anyone, regardless of means, regardless of skin color, regardless of religion, the opportunity to log in, take control of the data that they produce every day with everything that they do, and monetize it. Nothing more in line with diversity, equity, and inclusion than that narrative, right? And then on top of that, especially for U.S. Users, they have the opportunity to align with the seven that we have as a mission to donate those proceeds if they would like, to helping global warming or health organizations and things like that, charities. It's a great mission. And I found myself now at 39 years old, turning 40 next July, really concerned about what it is that is going to kind of cradle me to sleep at night, help me
Yeah.
help me get into that REM place faster, and be proud of the work that I do. And that has always been working with people who are starting further back in line in the race for no other reason but that they just have, their family had less means than them. So that was the big attraction to Tartle, and why I wanted to join you guys.
And here's how I see it with your position, Marty. Data is the great equalizer. All men or human beings are essentially born unequal in opportunity, but we die equal,
Yeah.
right? When you die, we're all the same. Doesn't matter at that point. How quickly can we equalize the opportunity of that playing field? And if 60% of our user base lives on less than $2.70 a day, 46% of those people can't find their next meal, how are they ever going to worry about education? We have to go back to the base. We have to really understand the world. I don't think people understand how horrific that statistic is. They can't find their next meal. Imagine if that was your worry. Talk about Maslow's hierarchy of needs. You can't get anywhere. So when I look at you, Marty, as the chief revenue officer, this is not about financial gain. You're the chief revenue officer for millions of people across the globe. That's how I see it. I don't see you doing this for Tartle. I see you doing this for human beings trying to live, trying to find their next meal. So every time you make a call, every time you educate an enterprise on the purpose, the value, the mission, and the principles of what Tartle is doing, how we're going to do it, and how we will succeed at doing it, you are elevating the lives of human beings. You are empowering them and emancipating them from the current situations they are in and extending their probabilities in life. That's what they need. You're not the chief revenue officer for us. You're for the millions of human beings, men, women, and children, all different race, color, religion, and creed, all across the world. That's how I see it for you. What does that mean to you?
Well, God bless you for putting that together so eloquently. Absolutely agree with you. And haven't heard you put it together that way before, and haven't heard you say that. I think we've said bits and pieces of that, but you've absolutely connected the dots for me with your statement there.
I also think, especially with higher education, people don't realize this. We can flip higher education. So let's say we have 1 million users in Indonesia.
Tell me.
And the World Health Organization wants to educate those 1 million users about something.
Okay.
We can flip higher education. Maybe it's a not-for-profit college. We can pay people to be educated.
So cool.
Would they fill out a data packet or maybe a syllabus? With questions, and they have to do research, and here's a PDF book. We can put whatever we want on the Tartle Marketplace.
You bet we can.
We can put PDFs, videos,
and you can
have teachers
to look at it.
Yeah. So if you're worried about India and COVID, you can take 1 billion people, put them on the Tartle system, have videos on there about how they should do, pay them to go through the course. Courses can be put on Tartle
and capture data from them at the same time.
Yeah. You're worried about Detroit and some of the undercities here in the United States, and you want to get education to them, incentivize them.
That's all you got to do. People need a good incentive.
Let the 1% incentivize them. Flip higher education on its edge.
Juicy.
And say, hey, let's start paying these people to be educated.
I love that. Rather than them paying for something that should have been free to them in the first place.
It should have been free in the first place. But I'm not saying just make it free, because that's the new revolutionary thing. Let's make education free. Pay people that are lower on the Maslow's hierarchy, bring them up. That's our whole responsibility as humans.
A rising tide lifts all ships.
Yes.
Tartle is the tide. Marty is the giant frigate ship coming in, captaining this thing with his big hat on. There's a huge storm, right?
Right.
And he's like guiding everybody else behind him.
And what school would team up with Marty and say, hey, let's do this. Let's try this in Indonesia. Let's put some syllabuses out there. Let's put some videos out there. Let's pay people to get educated.
Let's do it. You tell me Indonesia doesn't want to step up. They don't want to say, guess where's the new place to go? It's Indonesia. Indonesia wants to be in the news.
We have entrepreneurial training online at tartle.co.
Love that. I love that.
Yeah, it's crazy. The potential is endless. That's the beautiful part about it. And that's why I'm excited, Marty, about you coming on board Tartle, because the beautiful part about it is, like you said, it's elevating humanity.
That's all we got to do.
That's all Tartle is doing. It's a free marketplace that elevates humanity.
Should we have any other responsibility or focus? In my mind, no.
Right. And we need people to come along. We need businesses that are data champions.
Right.
To say, hey, how can we be ethical in the data that we're using, and how can we help humanity with the data that we have?
Right. And they can go right to Martin Herrick.
Yes.
And they can discuss it with him.
Yes.
They can discuss it with Marty, who has had personal experience in his own life and has seen both sides of that coin.
Yes.
Because the only way you can really do something in life is through experience. The only way you can speak to something eloquently is through experience.
Yeah. And Marty, I want to touch back to this, and I want you to talk about this. When we look at the underprivileged in America, and we look at that point of entry, because I think this is really important for a lot of our listeners, for people to understand, how hard is it for someone to get into higher education? Let's say they barely graduate high school, or they get a GED or whatever, to take that next step. Just like getting a meal. We're talking about people that can't eat a meal. They're on a whole different ball game there. Yeah. I'm talking about somebody that may be, they're extremely poor. They're being able to eat. They have, EBT card and all these things, but trying to get somebody into that next level, how difficult is that for them?
Well, there's a couple of different layers. So there's the aspect of paying for it. And there's the massive, massive amount of people across the country who aren't aware of what's available to them in financial aid from the federal government and from the schools that they would attend. So you get money in the form of student loans and grants from the federal government when you complete your FAFSA. Then the school that you're going to attend is also going to give you some scholarships and grants and things like that in your reward letter. And so there's just this big black hole of information around how you access that information. If you guys spend 5 minutes Googling, you'll see that the federal government, what's called the FAFSA, the Free Application for Federal Student Aid, FAFSA, is the application that students complete. Probably you guys completed it. Many of the people who are listening today and watching today have probably completed the application when they went to college at some point in the last 25 years. That determines how much financial aid that you get from the federal government. There's this huge lack of information around what is eligible. There's a lot of people that just say, I probably wouldn't be eligible for anything. I probably wouldn't be eligible for any money to go to college. So that's the first. That's the first hurdle. The next hurdle is really broken up into two sections. You have the physical campus, and then you have online campuses. Physical campuses, a little bit more difficult to attend because there's more overhead, so there's more cost. There's dorms. Colleges are building rock climbing gyms in the quad, and trying to give this amazing life experience.
Love rock climbing.
Food costs and things like that at the actual campus. So there's all the issues that, commuting to the campus, there's all the issues with that. And then with online education, it offers more access to more people across the country. But then you run into the issue of, do you have high-speed internet? Do you even have a computer that you can use to access your online classroom? Can you afford those things on a regular basis? A lot of these online schools have done a really good job of making it available even on your cell phone, just creating an application that you can log into on your cell phone so you can do your homework. But you can't write papers on your phone, or at least on most phones. You can't write papers and things like that. So you do need access to something a little bit more. And those are the challenges that people run into when coming to college, and just the ongoing cost of it as well. It's 4 years.
Well, and I don't mean to interrupt, Alexander. I'll have you answer this too. But what is our second big seven?
Educational access. Hello.
Yeah.
Hello.
First one's a climate. The second one's access to education.
That's our second big seven.
Nothing else really. Okay. Stabilize the climate and then educate, right? Allow people to educate themselves.
Yep.
Nothing else can. I don't care if you talk about human rights, global peace, anything after that. That stuff doesn't happen unless people are aware and educated. Everything else is useless. If you can't get your meal, right?
Right.
I'm not worried about anything else. I have to be aware about how I find opportunity, right? Not only do I have to understand about college, how to get into it, how to pay for it, but what about the opportunity outside of it? And then, using that data to move ourselves through that process. And even universities or colleges should be tracking beforehand and tracking after the fact those outcomes. One of the hardest things when it comes to ESG and all these impact funds and everything is tracking impact over time. They do a poor job at finding quantitative numbers to really measure that impact on an individual's life over time. And this can happen in higher education now. This is the bread and butter of human understanding, is education, right? So if we can track how that actually works, soup to nuts, from beginning to end, now we can do something impactful. Now we can really have a measurable stance to see where the success sits and how we can improve upon it and where things are failing. And that's how I see that data coming in and equalizing that.
Yeah, and this is the cool part with Marty. I mean, because I love TARTLE as a story of redemption, and I love this, because Marty, and you can talk about this. The amount of people that went into debt through the system that we have, through the big seven and number 2, educational access, you get to go back and people get to get paid. So that, let's say it was $200 million. TARTLE has a potential because TARTLE creates opportunity. Yep. That's what TARTLE is. Yep. It creates opportunity. It's a free marketplace for everyone. So now we could say, okay, 200 million, perfect. I'm gonna create educational access to offset that. We're gonna pay people that $200 million.
Love it.
To have education.
Yeah.
So it's not just him bringing revenue into TARTLE. It's him looking at that big seven, number 2, and saying, I'm championing higher education how can we have educational access out there? It's almost a double-edged sword, if you know what I mean.
That's exactly right. How do we chip away? Marty, how do you take the machete into the forest? How do you clear the path for people?
Well, I think it's two parts. I think it's one, giving people the opportunity to log into Turtle, get access to all the different data packets that we have, not just higher education, but all the different data packets. And I think there is going to be a time where higher education, if they're not already doing it already, is going to want to look at health records, is going to want to look at parents' insurance information, is going to want to look at, you know, 3 generations ago, did your grandparents own a house or something like that? Because all of that information trickles down and informs the person that they'll be admitting to the institution. So I think that's part of it. And then I think the second part of it is when our users are logged into Tartle, we need to be educating them. To Jason's point a few moments ago, we have informational, educational tools on our website, and make sure that we're pushing that out to these people who are accessing our Tartle platform and saying, hey, when you're filling out this data packet, did you know that you might be eligible for financial aid? That's going to be
Love
an
that.
aha moment for a lot of students. Did you know that the FAFSA takes 10 minutes to complete? And then you'll find out that if you're eligible for up to $8,000 in grants, money that you don't have to pay back, especially if you come from an underrepresented community, that's very likely for you. So we need to be using our platform not to just collect information from the people who are using us, but to make sure that we push actionable information out to them, especially when if we're talking about higher education.
Yeah, and that focus is the thing that's really going to bring this train forward for everybody. It's really going to start to develop that momentum. The possibilities are all there. It's just about opening up that awareness. And Marty, you're going to be spearheading it. And we're super, super happy to have you here doing that, to live that mission, vision, and principle and really elevate people's lives for the better. Many people talk about let's just create change in the world. Well, think change constantly. Things are naturally in flux. But how do we align those probabilities of cause and effect and articulate it into something, a narrative that really works for the human being? And I think your focus on higher education and the start of your podcast playlist that's going to be happening with a higher education focus and bringing on those that's where that story begins. Those are the earliest stages of that narrative, not written on a cell phone, but written with the voice and spoken right to the ear of many people, easily accessible and completely free for them to learn from. So Marty, thank you so much.
Yeah, absolutely. I mean, it's a pivotal time for higher education, and the people that we're going to be bringing onto the podcast and talking to about it know this. Everyone, if you, like I said earlier in the podcast, if you spend 5 minutes Googling, you're going to see headlines on top of headlines about how minority students are getting left behind because of the pandemic. It accelerated the demographic cliff that's been approaching higher education for the last 15 years, which is essentially that college age students, it's becoming a smaller population every year, and so colleges are having a hard time enrolling the numbers that they need to enroll to make sure that they stay in the black. And so a lot of what I'll be focusing on in those conversations is getting real actionable ideas out of these administrators, out of these leaders in higher education, to push it out to anybody who's interested in looking at it, to make sure everybody has these tools. Anyone who's listening has the tools that they need from the most innovative thinkers in higher education to start implementing at their institutions, TARTLE or otherwise, to make sure that they're successful and they're providing the right environment for their students.
I love that. You excited about the future, Marty?
I am. I'm really excited to be here at Tartle. You guys have been amazing to work with just in the short time that I've been here so far. So excited for this podcast and have this opportunity to really talk about this incredibly important message. So much going on in the world. I read something yesterday that said the next 10 years of our lives are so incredibly important for global warming. Well, we need the best minds in the world working on that problem. And I don't want to pivot into a different direction for this conversation, because I know that's a whole nother really complicated issue. But education is going to get us there. Educating the creative minds, the disciplined creative minds that we need to go and tackle those problems, those immense problems that we're facing over the next 10 years. It's the first step, right?
Yeah.
Educating and then problem solving.
Well, you never know. Those problem solvers may be in those underrepresented communities.
Yeah, and I think to close, I would like for I want to kind of let everyone know, especially on the higher education side of things, kind of like, and maybe Alexander, you can talk to this, and then Marty, you can talk to it. What like our because we're very transparent at Tartle with everything. What's our game plan for higher education? I know we have the podcast coming on,
Yep.
but and then who are we looking to team up with? What are we looking, to accomplish? Let's say within the next year, and why are we going towards higher education?
Yeah. Game plan number one. Okay. We have currently at this moment 3 data packets, which any individual, even here in the United States, anywhere, it doesn't matter, can come in and interact with on Tartle. That's generating 3 assets for themselves. Assets, which they would not only get paid for sharing that information, but that information which they share opens up a whole new world of opportunity that otherwise ceased to exist for them. That awareness is created. So that goal, that initial target for us is to speak with these educators, speak with these universities online or offline otherwise, on campus or not on campus, and bridge the gap between them and the prospective student. And at the same time, find a relationship that has perfect reciprocity of value and information being shared. That's our goal. That's our target right now. And Marty's going to be the one to execute on it. Marty, you have anything to say about that?
Yeah, I have a thesis. My
Go
thesis
ahead.
is that the users who will be using Tartle to fill out those education packets that we've created are probably in the blind spot of most colleges and universities. These colleges and universities don't have a direct line of access to these students. They're not going in to talk to their college counselors. They're not filling out surveys. They're not completing their FAFSAs. They're not doing things like that. They are searching for platforms like Tartle to find revenue that they can make for their family to help with the tough times that they're going through right now. That's what their focus is. And so, because that's their focus, they're not thinking about higher education and leaving home or taking their attention away from that. And so, I'm looking to prove to the higher education administrators that we go out to and the colleges that we partner with to buy data off of our platform that these are students they otherwise would have missed out on had they not taken a look at Tartle to see who's interacting with our platform.
Love that. No opportunity ever missed. Thank you again, Marty.